Hello, hello. This is my first live, so I am happy to be here. And today I want to talk a little bit about how we help our students or kids think critically and form their own opinions. And so just to give you a little bit of a background, I am a longtime educator and have taught in elementary school. I have globally taught adults and children English. I have lived abroad for 10 years, and I've had tons of experience learning how to listen for understanding, building my own thoughts and opinions, and then being able to talk about those differences. Even when we disagree, we can still have a productive conversation. In the homeschool world, I see a lot of conversations about what curriculum to use, how do we teach it, how do I set up my rhythms, how do I find my routine in teaching kids at home. But we don't spend so much time talking about the how we help our students to think. And so I'd love to ask you, have you ever asked a question to your kids and then they respond back and they say, and you think, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I would say, right? You're hearing this almost like an echo chamber, right? Of you ask them a question and they give you the same answer back. So this is a very normal, natural learning progression in students. They model behaviors. And so as they're listening to you answer questions and give opinions, they're modeling what they're watching. However, as teachers, we have the responsibility to teach them how to think. And so one of the biggest gifts that we can give our students is to help them learn how to think critically, ask good questions, considering multiple perspectives and listening for understanding, how to form thoughtful opinions, and express their opinions respectfully. And so I know that kids can ask a ton of questions, and I understand that it takes time and intentionality to build this skill, both in yourself and in your kids. But it's one of the most important skills that we can teach them. I'm going to kind of lay out a couple of steps as to how we can help our students think critically. I'm going to use a framework. So let's take doing chores, for example, right? So we're going to help them gather information about a topic first. So when we think about chores, are chores important? Why are they important? Do you think we could do chores? So I'd like to hear from a couple of you. Did you have chores growing up? Yes or no? Well, I'm seeing some shaking of heads, right? Okay, good. So many of us did have chores. I had chores. I had tons of chores I had to do. Now, I'd love to think about, do your kids have chores in your house? And if they do, I'd love for you to comment one word that comes to mind when you hear the word chores in your kids at home. Okay, responsibility. Okay, pushback, complaining, whining, right? Okay, so all of these things, right, come up and they all happen, right? So when we think about let's call it the opinion of chores, why we have chores. Every family does chores differently. And kids are going to have their opinion about chores, right? Do I want to do chores? Why do we have to do them? So-and-so does them differently. But when we open the conversation, right, we think about we ask our kids, why do we do chores? Why are chores important in our house? When we think about why are chores important, we can also start to bring in some different perspectives. Do your friends have chores? What chores do they do? Right? And then you can ask them their opinion. What do you think about having chores? What do you think about our chores in our house? Right? And so this naturally opens the conversation, to think about reasoning, evidence, empathy, understanding values. We could talk about fairness or responsibility. So first we ask them to gather information, or we ask questions to help them gather information about a topic. Then we start to ask and look at different perspectives. So understanding the why of others or the why of ourselves, right? And so this is getting into that critical thinking. So we want to think about what are some questions that we can ask our students. Why, or our children, why is it important that we do chores? What happens if we don't do the chores? So I'd love to hear from some of you. In the chores that are done at your house, do we think chores should be expected, part of the routine responsibility of being part of the home? Or do you give an allowance, or are chores paid activities that your kids can work towards? So I'm seeing a little bit of difference, right? Like some of us, maybe some of the bigger chores, like maybe the big weekend things, right? Like if you do XYZ, if you vacuum the whole upstairs or you vacuum the whole downstairs, maybe that can be a paid a paid chore. But some things like unloading the dishwasher or putting away your clothes, these are chores that are just expected household responsibilities. When we're helping our kids to think about different perspectives, some other questions that we can ask them is, why do some families expect chores and some people do not? Does age matter? Does the age that you are? If you're 5, what chores are your responsibility? If you're 9 or if you're 13, what are your responsibilities? And do those tasks matter between your ages? Or what skills do chores teach us? Thinking about that when we ask our kids, what do chores teach us, right? It can be, again, responsibility, fairness, taking pride in our things and our living environment. And if your child has argued against doing chores, what are some things that they have said? It's not fair. I don't want to. I'm a kid. I should play. That's a dad job or that's a mom job. And so when we think about the things that we can instill in our kids in the fairness, the responsibility, taking ownership of their toys, of their clothes, of their bedroom, right? It's helping them to think about why this task is important, right? Broadening this to critical thinking, right? That can be applied to so many other aspects or so many other topics, right? Is understanding the why of what we do, of why we do something. And that some people can do them different, right? So chores, for example. We do chores in our house because it teaches responsibility. It helps us to take pride in our things. It teaches ownership. These are my things. I want to take care of them. And other families might not have those same chores, and that's okay. But understanding maybe why they don't have chores, or maybe what other responsibilities do they have. And then when they are sharing their opinion about whether they think chores should be done or not, we want to help our students to back or prove their opinion. Right? So why do you think that we should do chores? Why do you think that they are important? What evidence do you have that supports that? Or what evidence do you have that helps shape your opinion? And so the other layer of this is opinions. So we use opinions all the time. We have opinions. Everybody has opinions, and we use them all the time. But how can we teach our students to really curate their opinion based on evidence? Now, we have talked about how do we help them gather information about the topic? How do we help them look at different perspectives of the topic? And now, what evidence are they using to back their opinion? That can be gathered in multiple different ways, right? Expanding that conversation of why is it important that we take ownership over our toys? Well, if my toys are out and about and somebody steps on them, then my toy is broken, right? I haven't taken responsibility. I haven't taken pride in my things, and now my things are broken, right? Or I left my backpack and I left all of my things out on the couch and forgot to put them away when I went to bed, and mom cleaned the house and now I can't find my things. So now I'm frustrated, right? So it's important that we take pride and build our responsibilities and build that responsibility within our students with the understanding of the why. And the other thing that I want to add is allowing space for others' opinions. And so this can be, I'll say this can be a challenging aspect or layer to add in, where we've helped our students or our children to form their opinions, and maybe even they're really good at explaining their why. Why is their opinion important? Where are they basing this on? They maybe are very verbal and they are pretty matter of fact of what their reasoning is, and that's good. Right? But then we want to think about, how do we allow space for others' opinions, right? And so the way that we can build this is when we're talking about opinions or the why about a certain topic, we can intentionally pose a differing perspective or a differing lens, right? And we're not doing this in an argumentative way, but we're sharing reasoning of otherness. And so when we do this, right, sometimes it can cause some defensiveness to come up, either in our children or in ourselves. So I encourage you to just kind of, understand that we're just thinking about why someone else might think the other way. So some things that we can ask are, can you help me understand your thinking? Why are you thinking this way? Or what makes you feel this way about this particular topic, right? And then thinking about why someone might disagree. If you have an opinion that chores should not be done in the house, right? You have your evidence. You think that chores should not be done in the house because that's mom and dad's responsibility, which we know isn't necessarily true. The child's viewpoint is that students or kids shouldn't do chores, right? And they feel very strongly about that. But then if you pose, let's say, mom's perspective, well, if chores don't get done and I have to do all the chores, well, then maybe I don't have time to make lunch for you. Or maybe I don't have time to make dinner. Or if you don't help me do the chores, if you don't have a responsibility in this, then we can't get out of the house to go to the park, or we can't get out of the house to go to the aquarium, or whatever we're doing, right? Because certain things need to get done. So our students and our children and ourselves can hold strong opinions about things. And sometimes that can turn into debate, but I encourage you to think about some of the posing questions that we can guide our students to help that critical thinking. And so some of those things are, what do we agree with? What do we not agree with? What would you recommend instead of this, right? If we're not doing chores, if you think chores is not something that we need to do, then what would you recommend in place of that, right? And help them get thinking about what other options that they could bring to the table. If we have to do chores, what are some things that we could change that maybe would make it easier or more enjoyable, and helping them to kind of think of different options? And so we can apply this to any different topic. So when I think about different topics, right, it can be, we can talk about it in terms of history, right? Things we agree with or don't agree with that happen. We can think about it in terms of economics, right? Racism, slavery, media, screen time, relationships, ethics, right? All of these things have many different opinions about them. And so when we frame it in a way that helps our students to identify the why of their opinion, back it with evidence, consider different or other people's opinions or other people's viewpoints of something, and then maybe even going a layer deeper and asking them to give reasoning for the other opinion, right? Why is that other opinion something that somebody else is having a firm opinion on, right? And so one thing that I want to just kind of leave us with as we close out is that critical thinking is not something that we teach in one lesson. It is something that we build over time in different seasons, in different developmental stages of our kids. And we build it through many different ways, through conversation, curiosity, respectful disagreement, right? How do we have that conversation about my opinion is different than yours, but I want to understand your opinion. And also helping them understand that if someone else has a different opinion as they're listening to the other reasoning, right, is like that can shift or maybe change your own opinion, and that's okay too. To help our kids, to ask them good questions, but to help them build good questioning techniques to ask others, allowing our kids to wrestle with the ideas of different perspectives, different opinions, and the why, right? And so the beautiful thing about critical thinking is that it teaches us to reach beyond just one conversation, but to include lots of different topics. It helps us to think about problem solving and expressing our ideas respectfully, forming opinions, evaluating information, and then understanding perspectives that differ from our own. And over time, eventually, this becomes a really valuable skill that our students and our children can use to apply to many different topics in life, right? Because our opinions are shaped and formed about many different things. The goal isn't to hand our kids answers all the time. It isn't to have them be echoes of our own opinions or of our own thoughts, but to help them really think critically and to be thoughtful and curious and grounded in what they think and what others think, to ask good questions and to make informed decisions for themselves. So I'd love for you to think about what is one small thing that you can add into your practice of conversation with your kids to build that critical thinking this week.